Tonight we have a creepy story in ASMR style. Make a warm drink. Get comfy, and I'll begin. The River Country.
It had been 3 years since my family had last gone on a vacation to Florida, something we did annually before the recession hit. Since we now had enough money, my parents decided, under the popular demand of my sister and I, that we would go to Walt Disney World again. We were both teenagers, and our parents kind of saw this as a bit juvenile, but we decided it would be fun anyway. I could not wait to finally go back, and neither could my sister, being avid theme park goers as well. We were especially attracted to the creativity and the, well, magic, as one would say, about the rides there. They never got old and had their share of nostalgia and excitement. However, there was one other reason I wanted to go. You normally associate Disney World with words such as excitement, fun and happiness. But with these characterizations come counterbalances. After scrolling through OMG Facts one night, I came across a rather interesting fact. It was about an abandoned water park in WDW, apparently named River Country. I was absolutely appalled by this, since I had previously thought of Disney in a more idealistic and perfect way. The water park was directly on the shores of Bay Lake, being that huge stagnant body of water adjacent to the Magic Kingdom. River Country was, and still is, on the same side as the theme park just mentioned, but right next to a resort called Walt Disney's Fort Wilderness Resort. Surrounding the water park on the resort side is a large green wall with signs dotting it. The place opened in 1976 and used water from Bay Lake in most of the park's attractions. It was very rustic and wilderness-based in design and contained artificial rocks that resembled those used on another attraction, Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. There was a dam present to keep chunks of dirt and mud from getting into the water too, so guests did not have to worry about swimming in an artificial bog created by water from the lake. It was open for 25 years, closing its doors in 2001, and in 2005, a statement released by Disney said that the park would be closed for good. So, for about 11 years, River Country has been sitting abandoned. Nature is in its advanced stages of reclaiming the area, but the slides remain, and so do the artificial rocks and the small pond, which is now a swamp that was used for swimming. Many urban explorers have infiltrated the area, jumping over the walls to get footage of the abandoned water park. One of the most controversial things about the park nowadays is why it closed, which is what I was destined to find out. I wanted to see some real footage of the area before it closed as well, since, from what I heard, it was very joyous and bustling with tourists compared to its ghost town status today. I was without internet at the time, so about 2 days before we were planning to leave, I went to the local library, which archived many old videos that people in my community had dug up in their attics and donated to the library to be part of a small historical society. Hoping that I might find some good footage, I asked the librarian if they happened to carry any videos concerning family vacations. She nodded and brought me to a small section containing many old VCR cassettes and a few DVDs here and there. After about half an hour of searching, I finally came across a cassette with the words, "The Old-Fashioned Swimming Hole," inscribed on the top of it. This was a term used to describe River Country during its glory days. So I took it, almost certain that it was the footage I was looking for. I asked the librarian if I could sign it out, but she told me that the historical videos had to stay in the library. I could, however, watch the video in a small conference room behind the front desk. The librarian led me into the windowless room, and I took a seat in front of the television. She left the room and closed the door so that the audio would not disturb any of the other library patrons. This was significant because the water park closed for good the very next day, on November 2nd. The two walked up to the bigger water slides in the park, which led directly into the pond, supplied by the green water of Bay Lake. Once they both got to the top of the slide, one man prepared to slide down. The two laughed over what seemed to be an inside joke, and finally, the cameraman ended up pushing his friend down. I heard him scream in delight as he descended to the pond. The cameraman then proceeded back the way they came to get to the slides and across a bridge that traversed the small lagoon. He ended up back at the pond shore where the sound of a splash was heard. This is when the video started to unsettle me a little. After waiting at the shore of the pond for about 3 minutes, nobody surfaced. The cameraman began to cry his friend's name frantically and started to run back to get help at the Fort Wilderness Resort. He stopped abruptly at what seemed a small, shallow pond on hearing a faint cough. He instantly turned around and saw a barely visible shadow about 10 feet behind him. Relieved, the cameraman started to approach his friend. The friend's head was hanging down and he slowly inched it up. The cameraman started to panic as the features of the other man's face began to show. Dry blood was around his mouth. One of the most disturbing parts of this image was that there were patches of skin missing that revealed parts of the man's skull and jawbone, and he was even missing his right eye. I felt sick, and my heart also began to race as fear started to settle in. As the last minutes of the film approached, the friend muttered something that sounded like, "There's no magic here." With that, the cameraman ran for his life. I bolted to the door leading out of the room. I reached for the doorknob but paused. The television was giving off the sound of an old furnace found in the basement of a home. This tone, for some reason, kept me from moving anywhere. I was just staring blankly at the television. The cameraman was still sprinting, but did not seem to be making any progress. He ended up back at the pond where the slide had dumped his friend. You could hear him sobbing, fearing for his life. Suddenly, the tape began to gradually slow down as the man frantically looked from side to side. The audio volume, along with the furnace sound, went up as the video lagged. The cameraman turned all the way around and shrieked at the sight of his friend. The video paused on this frame, exposing the caked blood all over the other man's face. The top of his skull bone was now completely exposed, his right eye still missing. His mouth was wide open, and coming from it was what looked like a combination of the water from Bay Lake and bile. This stayed on the screen for about 10 seconds and switched to a black screen, displaying one single message. The epidemic starts today. Instantly, the power went out, and I was left alone in the darkness of the conference room. I became so terrified, as I could not see a thing, and I could not see the door either. I began to shake in absolute fear. River Country had closed because of this, and it was obvious. Walt Disney World had been keeping a disgusting secret. I rushed to the other side of the room, disoriented, but all I felt was a cold breath breathing down my neck, and the smell of bile and blood. I turned around and saw the face of the man who had gone down the slide, his right eye still missing, his jaw hanging open, and then he smiled and laughed sinisterly, and I passed out. I woke up and realised I was in the old River Country Park. It was dark and there was a horrible smell. I stood up and looked around and noticed dead bodies scattered everywhere. It looked like a bloodbath. I carefully examined a few bodies close by and realised that they all seemed to have suffered the same fate. Eyes missing, skin dissolved from their bones, and dry blood and a vomit-like substance around their now wide open mouths. I turned to run, but realised I had no idea which way was the way out, so I stood a minute, checking all the areas to figure out which way to go. Just as I had found the exit sign and was ready to escape, I felt that familiar cold breath on my neck and felt an icy cold but slimy hand pick me up from behind. I screamed and fought, but nothing helped. I was carried all the way to the top of a slide. I looked the chance to think I was pushed down the slide into the murky swamp-like water, the pain was unbearable. I could see my skin peeling off my bones, blood now becoming the water as one. I felt my right eye popping from the socket, and everything went black. I'm now forever part of the River Country Park, trapped here like the rest of the Walt Disney River zombies, just waiting eagerly for another to watch that videotape and come and join us.
Thanks for watching. Good night. Sleep tight.